Our next presenter is Dr. Tina Puntervold. She's an associate professor at the Department of Energy Resources at the University of Stavanger in Norway. And she's also currently an assistant director of the National EOR Center of Norway. Until recently, she served as an associate editor of Elsevier's Journal of Petroleum Science and Engineering. Dr. Tina Puntervold has a master in physical chemistry and a PhD in petroleum engineering. Before joining the academia, she worked as a field engineer for Schlumberger. Dr. Tina Puntervold will present to us: is there a low salinity EOR potential on the Norwegian continental shelf? And she will tell us about some experimental core fluiding and spontaneous inhibition studies on outcrop sandstones, where low salinity water injection has shown very promising oil recovery results compared to injecting formation water or seawater. Stay with us and remember to send all your comments and questions on the chat. They are going to be discussed later on the panel section. And thank you so much, Dr. Tina Puntervold, for being with us today.
Hi, my name is Tina Puntervold, and today I will be presenting: is there a smart water EOR potential on the Norwegian continental shelf? In 2018, the Norwegian Petroleum Directorate, together with Imperial College, studied 27 of the largest oil fields on the Norwegian continental shelf, investigating technical EOR potential from employing different EOR methods. They found that the technical potential was about 600 million standard cubic feet oil equivalents, and at $60 per barrel, it amounts to approximately 1,500 billion NOK. They also found that the most promising EOR methods on the Norwegian continental shelf was hydrocarbon miscible WAG, smart water polymer, CO2 miscible WAG, and low salinity surfactant polymer. In 2020, Imperial College, together with Norwegian Petroleum Directorate, performed a new study on the overall EOR potential on the Norwegian continental shelf, looking at incremental oil volumes. And it was calculated based on including only the single top process per field, and this time they included 46 fields. They performed advanced screening, including operational, economic, environmental considerations, and the likelihood for implementation. And from the technical screening only, incremental oil was about 700 million standard cubic meter, by including the operational and economic costs, the technical potential decreased to 344 million standard cubic meter, and now the technical potential was highest with hydrocarbon miscible gas WAG, low salinity polymer, low salinity only, and CO2 miscible WAG. When they also included environmental considerations into the screening, the technical potential decreased even more to 282 million standard cubic meter. And now we can see that the most promising methods were hydrocarbon miscible gas WAG, low salinity polymer, and CO2 miscible WAG. But we see now that the low salinity only has significantly increased. At the Clare Ridge field at the UK sector, they are employing low salinity water injection from day one, and they expect to recover 40 million additional barrels from this field. So if the UK can do it, why not Norway? So what is smart water or low salinity water? Well, smart water is injection brine with modified ionic composition, and the composition is dependent on reservoir mineralogy. Low salinity water is an injection brine which has low salt content, but both these methods aim to improve wettability and reservoir sweep. And in both methods, no expensive chemicals are added, so they are environmentally friendly. And how does the smart water work? It improves sweep efficiency. It works both in carbonates and sandstones, but the mechanism for the wettability alteration is different. So if we look here in the figure, and if you inject the formation water or any other type of brine, then it will displace the oil from this larger pores. But while if you inject the smart water that can alter wettability, you can also make the water invade the smaller pores and displace the oil from the smaller pores. To observe EOR by wettability alteration, we need a reservoir that is not completely water wet. Otherwise, there is no smart water EOR potential. So we need to understand the initial wettability of the reservoir. And initial reservoir wettability is dictated by the reservoir chemistry and interactions between the crude oil containing polar organic acids and bases, the brine, especially the formation water salinity and the composition, and the rock. And the rock can be carbonate rock minerals or sandstone rock minerals. And these provide mineral surface reactions with the water and oil. And in most chemical processes, temperature is important. Regarding rock chemistry, the reservoir rock is normally divided into carbonate and sandstone, and the carbonate may contain chalk or limestone, both are calcium carbonates, or dolomite, also including magnesium. There could also be other minerals present like anhydrite, calcium sulfate. Sandstones contain, it's not just a sandstone, they contain quartz, clays, feldspars and other minerals, and the clays could be present as kaolinite, aelite chloride at different in different amounts. Feldspars could be sodium feldspar, calcium feldspar or potassium feldspar present in different amounts, and other minerals could be, for instance, anhydrite, calcium sulfate or carbonate as a cement. But carbonates are normally positively charged at slightly alkaline conditions, and sandstones are normally negatively charged at slightly acidic conditions. But of course there are exceptions. But there's generally large variation in reservoir rock mineralogy. And there's different chemistry involved in initial wettability generation and wettability alteration processes. Brine chemistry. To observe any EOR effects, we need an injection water that is different from the formation water, because we need to disturb the chemical equilibrium between the crude oil, the brine and the rock established in the reservoir. So we must be able to unstick the oil from the rock surface. And how can we do that? Well, one solution is to inject the smart water. Crude oil is not a homogeneous phase. It contains polar organic acids and bases that have affinity to the rock surface, and these influence the rock wettability. And they are also crude oil anchor molecules at the surface. And the organic bases could be represented by this small molecule quinoline, and carboxylic acids could be represented by this small molecule benzoic acid. And the charges of these molecules are depending on pH. So at low pH, the base is positively charged, but at higher pH, it loses its charge and becomes neutral. The acids at low pH is neutral and protonated, while at a higher pH, it loses the proton and becomes negatively charged. And this has, of course, effect on their affinity for the rock surface. To evaluate the efficiency of any water-based EOR methods relying on wettability alteration, we need to understand the initial wettability of the reservoir. Sandstone mineralogy is composed of quartz, clays, feldspars, and cementing material. And the clay surface is very large, and it contains negative charges due to the cation exchange capacity and deficiency in the mineral lattice. And these negative charges need to be charge balanced by either inorganic ions from the brine phase or by components and ions from the oil phase. So the initial wettability is then a competition between the ions present in the brine phase and the oil components. In addition to understanding the initial wettability, we also need to understand the wettability alteration mechanism for being able to create better reservoir simulation models. And we're not going into all the details. We have proposed chemical wettability alteration methods that tries to explain the low salinity smart water EOR effect. And basically, when you inject a low salinity brine, there is a local increase in pH observed, and that increase in pH can then transform the basic and acidic material from a charge that has affinity to the surface to a charge that has not affinity to the surface. And by this charge change, the oil components can be released from the surface. So is there a smart water EOR potential? Here we have a reservoir A at Norwegian continental shelf at high temperature above 130 degrees C. We have tested different brines and looked at oil recovery using these brines and how efficient the brines are in displacing the oil. So the first brine we tested was a low salinity brine. We also tested the formation water. We have tested a modified seawater, and it's modified to contain less divalent ions compared to a standard seawater. And what we can see from the oil recovery test is that if you inject the formation water, you reach an oil recovery level up to this point here. If you instead inject a low salinity brine, oil recovery dramatically increases and reaching a higher oil recovery plateau. If you inject the seawater, standard seawater, it displaces oil to this level and it's quite a slow process. But if you inject a modified seawater, it's a much faster process, but ultimate oil recovery level is the same as in a standard seawater process. So from these results, we can say that we get 40 to 50% additional oil produced by low salinity water injection, and seawater does not seem to be the best injection brine. And remember that these most reservoirs on Norwegian continental shelf, they are offshore fields. And the reason for seawater not being as efficient is the amount of divalent ions present in the seawater that prevents the wettability alteration and especially the pH increase. What we also could observe is that the low salinity water injection delays the water breakthrough and producing a lot more oil after just the one pore volume injected. We have another reservoir B at the Norwegian continental shelf, also at high temperature, where we have also tested low salinity effect after seawater flooding. So we have injected the formation water. We have injected the low salinity brine, which produces much more oil than the formation water. And we have also injected seawater, which again produces the least amount of oil. And if we switch from seawater injection to low salinity injection, which could be reasonable scenario offshore, then there is no extra oil recovered by low salinity injection. And the same thing we see here. In this case, we switch from formation water to seawater to low sal, but there's hardly any extra oil recovered. So low salinity injection is most promising, providing high oil recovery within a reasonable short time. And also, this is very important that there is no low salinity EOR effect observed after seawater flooding in this case. A third reservoir C at Norwegian continental shelf, high temperature. We have only two cores here, but we have tested low salinity water injection versus seawater water injection in these cores. And to be able to secure or to be sure about our results, we have switched directions. So in this left case here, we did first a seawater flood, and then we restored the core and did a low salinity flood, and the low salinity flood produced more oil. And in the other core we did the opposite. So in this case we did first the low salinity flood, and then after restoration the seawater flood. And by doing this we could minimize any core restoration effects on the results. So in both cases we see that the low salinity injection recovers more oil, more than seawater in both cores. And so it is valid results, and the reason for this small difference in this case is that this field is not really the best candidate. So what's next? Hybrid EOR potential. So for outcrop core, we did the core flood, where we first injected smart water, which is a low salinity brine and sandstone, and then we switched to injecting a low salinity with polymer. And we saw an ultimate recovery with low salinity polymer of 86% of the oil in place, which is a lot. And the reason for this high oil recovery is that during the low salinity water injection, we see we alter wettability by the smart water, and then that creates more residual mobile oil after the low salinity water injection, because there's redistribution and less and oil entrapment. And this oil is efficiently displaced with HPAM polymer. So is there a smart water EOR potential on the Norwegian continental shelf? Yes, the answer is yes. Laboratory work indicate potentially large EOR potential, especially if the smart water or low salinity brine is injected from day one. We see accelerated oil production and also lower water production with time. So this could be positive for the lower total CO2 emissions. So it's important to know about the mineralogy, then to study the initial wettability is important. We need to know about the reactivity of the ions in the injected brine, and then we can design the best brine for that reservoir to improve the oil production. The authors acknowledge all oil and energy companies that have funded research work over the years, and we also acknowledge Research Council of Norway and the industry partners of the National EOR Center for support. Thank you very much, and I will be glad to answer questions. Thank you.